190 nautical miles south of Iceland. Open sea, gray water, 5-meter swell, a sky so low you could almost touch it. A rusted, very large crude carrier is cutting through the North Atlantic at 15 knots. 2 million barrels of empty tank space below deck. On the hull, a fresh coat of red paint, a Russian tricolor, applied by the crew somewhere off Morocco 12 days earlier. It is still drying. Above the ship, the first sound is not a shout. It is a rotor. 2 MH-6 little birds from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, come in low and fast. Behind them, an AC-130J Ghost Rider gunship orbits in the clouds. A British Royal Navy vessel holds station on the horizon. The tanker is called the Marinera. 2 weeks ago, she was called the Bella 1. 2 months ago, she was flagged in Guyana. The men who own her are sitting in an office in Istanbul. The oil she was going to load belonged to Caracas. The money was going to flow eventually to Tehran and Moscow. None of that matters anymore. The ship is boarded. The crew is detained. The game is over. This is the story of an 18-day chase across an ocean, a legal doctrine resurrected from the American Civil War, and a $1 trillion smuggling economy that Washington just decided to break in public. And if you own a dollar, drive a car, or heat a home, the consequences of this boarding are already inside your wallet. Part 1. The ocean no one was watching. Before the boarding, you need the empire it broke. The Shadow Fleet is the biggest industry you have never heard of. The Kyiv School of Economics puts it at roughly 1,400 ships. The Ukrainian government catalog, updated in February, lists 1,337. S&P Global estimates that 1 in 5 oil tankers currently at sea anywhere in the world is moving sanctioned crude. That is a fleet larger than the entire merchant marine of Japan, operating in the dark. The business model is simple. A buyer in Mumbai or Guangzhou wants cheap Russian or Iranian oil. A seller in Novorossiysk or Bandar Abbas has it. Between them stands a wall of sanctions, insurance bans, and port blacklists built by the G7 and the European Union after February 2022. So between them, someone else builds a bridge. The bridge is an aging tanker, usually 15 to 20 years old, bought secondhand for a fraction of its replacement cost. It is registered in a flag of convenience: Gabon, the Cook Islands, Palau, the Comoros. Gabon alone more than doubled its tanker registry in 2023. It is insured by a small Russian firm nobody has ever heard of. It carries a crew from 6 different countries, paid in cash, on a contract written in a language half of them do not speak, and when it needs to disappear, it just turns off its transponder. The Automatic Identification System, AIS, is the GPS beacon every commercial ship on Earth is required to broadcast. Shadow Fleet operators treat it like a light switch. The Bella 1 alone, according to a forensic reconstruction by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, went dark 17 separate times inside Iranian waters between July and November 2025. In the Strait of Malacca, she blacked out 5 more times. She spent months loitering inside the Iranian Exclusive Economic Zone, drifting at 3 knots, rendezvousing with other ghost tankers to transfer cargo, a practice called ship-to-ship transfer, designed to break the paper trail. 3 million barrels from Iran to Syria in 2024 alone. Nobody asked who paid. 2/3 of these ships sail without real insurance. Nearly all are a single corroded hull away from an environmental disaster. The Quran briefing from February puts it plainly. This is no longer just a sanctions problem. It is a rule of law and a maritime safety problem wrapped together, and every Western port authority in 2026 is being told to treat it that way. This is the ocean Russia built after losing SWIFT. Iran had already built one. Venezuela joined. By late 2025, the 3 pariah economies were running a single interwoven logistics empire, estimated in various industry audits to move between $150 and $200 billion of crude per year. Moscow was still pumping. Tehran was still exporting, Caracas was still selling, and the G7 price cap That elegant, technocratic idea from December 2022 had become a joke everyone pretended to tell with a straight face. Until one afternoon in November 2025, in a meeting room in the Treasury Building on Pennsylvania Avenue, someone in the new administration decided the joke was over. Part 2, the 18-day chase. December 10th, 2025. Caribbean Sea between Grenada and Trinidad. A VLCC called the Skipper, flying a Guyanese flag she is not actually registered under, has just departed Puerto Jose with 1.85 million barrels of Venezuelan crude. A Coast Guard maritime security response team, supported by Marine Special Operations, boards her near Curacao. The operation takes 40 minutes. Attorney General Pam Bondi announces a federal seizure warrant issued 2 weeks earlier. The vessel had been sanctioned since 2022 for financing the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah. It is the first American maritime seizure of a fully loaded, sanctioned crude tanker in the Western Hemisphere since the 1898 Spanish-American War. Nobody in the shipping industry slept well that night. 7 days later, Donald Trump announces a quarantine on all sanctioned vessels entering or leaving Venezuela. The word is chosen with surgical care. A blockade, under international law, is an act of war. A quarantine is sanctions enforcement. The distinction will matter in court. It will not matter on the water. And on December 20th, the Bella 1, owned by Lewis Marine Shipholding Enterprises of Istanbul, steaming westward toward Puerto La Cruz to load her share of Venezuelan crude, sees a Coast Guard cutter appear on her horizon. She turns, hard, into the open Atlantic. What happens next takes 18 days. The Bella 1 runs east, across the mid-ocean ridge, through the shipping lanes that link the Caribbean to Europe. On December 24th, Russia's Maritime Register, acting on a political instruction nobody has ever seen issued that fast before, grants her temporary Russian registration. It is done on paper. There is no inspection. There is no change of ownership. Article 91 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea requires a genuine link between the flag state and the vessel. The link here is a fax. On December 31st, somewhere off the coast of Morocco, the crew paints a Russian tricolor on the side of the hull. 3 colors, rolled on by hand. They change the name on the stern to Marinera. They change the MMSI number, the digital fingerprint used in maritime databases. The ship becomes, legally speaking, a different object. On January 1st, 2026, the Russian Maritime Register formally lists the Marinera. On January 6th, Moscow's Transport Ministry publicly demands Washington cease its pursuit and dispatches a naval escort. Reports at the time included a submarine. The Russian Foreign Ministry uses the word piracy. Moscow has not used that word about the United States in a formal diplomatic note since the Cold War. In London, the British cabinet approves Royal Navy and Royal Air Force support for the American operation. Surveillance aircraft track the tanker from above. A Royal Fleet auxiliary vessel positions itself within helicopter range. U.S. Army Night Stalkers, flown quietly into the UK in late December, wait. On the afternoon of January 7th, 190 miles south of Iceland, the Marinera makes a sharp turn south toward British waters, possibly hoping a British-aligned court might complicate the American warrant. The little birds launch from the cutter before she completes the maneuver. The boarding lasts less than 12 minutes. 17 Ukrainian sailors, 6 Georgians, 3 Indians, and 2 Russians are taken into custody. The ship is empty of cargo. She was never going to carry Venezuelan oil again. She was the warning. By the end of January 2026, a pattern is visible. 7 tankers seized, court warrants filed for dozens more. The M. Sophia intercepted in the Caribbean the same day as the Marinera, the Veronica on January 15th, the Sajida on January 21st, the Aquila II in the Indian Ocean on February 9th, the Veronica III on February 14th. Each one a separate court case, each one a separate federal forfeiture proceeding, each one, in the cold language of Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell, interdicted at the time and place of our choosing. And here is the part nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. The legal basis for all of this is a doctrine called prize law, revived from the United States Civil War. In 1862, Union prize courts adjudicated the capture of Confederate blockade runners. In 1898, the Supreme Court upheld the seizure of a Spanish merchant cargo during wartime. In 1990, U.S. Navy boarding teams used the same framework to stop oil from leaving Iraq under UN sanctions. The doctrine was dusted off, carefully modernized with a terrorism financing civil forfeiture wrapper, and pointed at the shadow fleet. There is one small problem. The United States never ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Russia did, the European Union did, China did. So when Moscow and Beijing complain that Washington is violating UNCLOS, the American response is, essentially, we are not a party to that treaty. You cannot break a contract you never signed. What Washington did ratify, decades ago, is a dense stack of anti-terrorism financing statutes. The legal architecture used to seize the Marinera is the same one federal prosecutors used to freeze the assets of a Hezbollah donor in Michigan. That is not an accident. The Bella 1 was sanctioned in 2024 for transporting cargo linked to the Quds Force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and to Hezbollah. Once a designation like that is attached to a hull, the vessel becomes, under U.S. law, the legal equivalent of a car used in a bank robbery. Civil forfeiture doctrine, that same quiet power prosecutors have used for decades to seize cash on highway stops, now applies to a 300-meter crude carrier halfway across the North Atlantic. The people who designed this,